Hello, Miami alumni and friends. JJ Slager here. I am eager to be bringing you another live web event from the Alumni Association at Miami. And I'm so happy to be joined by Carl Landau, class of 79 from Miami today. Welcome, Carl.
Oh, thanks, JJ. Very excited. And I assume you're live in Oxford, Ohio?
Live from Oxford, Ohio. And
Okay.
you are live from California, right?
Yeah, Sacramento.
All right. And do you want to share? I see you have a unique T-shirt on. Do you want to share what
Oh,
you have
yes.
going on there?
Yes, this is my Dummies book, my T-shirt. So you have to be a published author of the Dummies series to have these. So it's a big honor. So
Yeah, well, you'll talk a little bit more about pickleball, I think, too. Today's webinar is how to have a successful second act, and you have a whole podcast with over 60 episodes on second acts. So you're one of the best people to talk about that. I used to be somebody as the podcast. If
right.
you want to check that out, and Carl has a bunch of episodes. He's going to talk about what he's learned on those and talk about some of the specific stories of second acts. And we welcome your questions about second acts or pickleball too for Carl as we talk today. We'd love to keep this interactive. He's going to share some stories, like I said, and then we have some questions submitted beforehand, and we'll take yours live if you hit the ask a question button below that. Carl, I know we were brought together by a shared connection with Dr. Bob Vogel, retired professor at Miami. And I know he's been on your podcast as well, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about yourself? And I know you, I listened to a little bit of your comedy special, and I know you started, you were applying to colleges when you were a kid, and
Right.
I want to know how you ended up at Miami and tell that story if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, I probably won't tell the whole story, but I was a very poor student. I suffered from dyslexia, which I know. Well, in the '60s, they didn't have that word. No one knew what that was. I really had trouble reading and writing. And so part of my comedy act is they had in the 1960s a different word for it, stupid. And so I really struggled as a student. And it wasn't until my senior year that I got straight A's somehow. And, I started writing. I became the school editor. And I wanted to go to the University of Wisconsin School of Journalism. And I grew up in Cleveland. And anyway, so it's in my comedy special, I talk about it where I applied and I got in. And my mom told me, well, you're not going there. And I'm like, why? I don't understand. I show her, the acceptance letter and all that. And she's like, we don't have the money to, for out of state. It was like 3 times the amount of money. And I'm like, Mom, why'd you let me apply? And she's like, I didn't think you'd get in. So anyway, which sort of talks about my mom's sense of humor. And and I ended up going to Miami University, and it actually worked out great. So life works out in freaky ways, but the whole story in retrospect is sort of funny.
Yeah, that is funny. And then I know you said when you were on campus, it was a little bit different from nowadays. It was only 3-2 beer, right?
Yeah, I thought 3-2 beer was a great idea because at 18 you could still go to the bars. And so I went to school 75 to 79. Oxford was a dry town, but they did have 3-2 beer, which is basically light beer. And I thought it was a good idea because it gave you an opportunity to go to the bars and experience that. But it was like going to a bar on training wheels because you have to drink a lot of 3-2 beer to have any effect, really, which we successfully did from occasion, so.
You still were able to handle it.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm going to let you get into a little bit of a chat. We'll be back on for questions and in between. But if you want to go ahead and share from the beginning of your presentation, Carl, we'll go from there. And thank you all viewers at home for watching and for participating.
Yeah, well, I thanks a lot, JJ, and I really appreciate everyone listening. And maybe I'll reconnect with some alumni I didn't know that I still knew. So anyway, so JJ?
Yeah. I think you just need to click back to the beginning of your
Oh, okay.
slides down there at the bottom, and
Okay.
we'll be in good shape.
All right. Well, this went seamless.
We did practice. Here we go.
Okay. All right. Well,
All right.
that's me at 3 years old, or I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. You'll probably recognize the kitchen wallpaper. I think we all had that, growing up. And I'm wearing my dad's glasses there. So you're typical sort of goofy kid. Um, so this is the only picture I could find from freshman year, 1975, and I'm actually wearing a vintage Cleveland Cavaliers shirt from 1970. I think they started in 69 or 70. And for those people that are fans of Napoleon Dynamite, you may really appreciate this. So everyone needs to be good at one thing. And literally, I'm only good at one thing, and that is recognizing, identifying market trends. So in the 80s, it was high tech. In the 90s, it was craft beer. And then 2000 to 2022, it was niche vertical markets. And then now I'm involved in podcasts, baby boomer market, and pickleball. And they're all like super, big deal right now. And so that's, like I said, everyone has to be good at one thing, and that's mine. Um, so yeah, I'm the guy who created the ad "Buy an Ad, Get a Cat," and that was in my first magazine, Computer Language. And I went viral with this ad. There was talk of this guy who was sending cats in the mail and all that, and literally it got picked up on the UPI. Remember newspapers and all that. But anyway, it was in 250 newspapers about this "Buy an Ad, Get a Cat." And there was a number on there. It says 1-800-GET-A-CAT. And which ended up being someone's phone number, and SPCA wasn't happy. And anyway, so I've made up with the SPCA. Everything's cool. And then, like I said, in the 90s, I started Brew Your Own. And this large gentleman's in a tub. And this created quite a stir for like many reasons that we don't really need to go into. But the brewers were really upset because that is not how do you sanitize beer. So as I mentioned, in the 80s, I started my first magazine when I was 26 years old. It was called Computer Language. It was for professional. It was the first magazine for professional programmers. And then I started a magazine called AI Expert. It was one of the first magazines about artificial intelligence. And then I started a conference trade show, Software Development, and which was a huge success. In the early 80s, this was sort of a big deal. And in fact, Bill Gates was my first keynote. And we had interviewed him for our magazine, Computer Language, spent an hour and a half in his office. This is like in early 80s. And I asked him, you know what, Bill, I'm thinking about starting this conference. Would you speak? And 2.5 years later, we did start the conference. I contacted his assistant and said, Bill Gates said he would speak at our conference. And amazingly, he did. I don't know if a lot of people know, Bill Gates actually is a programmer. And that's really, how he got his start with Microsoft. And so my claim to fame is having Bill Gates as my first keynote of my very first event. So basically, my entire career just went downhill from there. I'm sorry. And then in 1990s, I started a bunch of craft beer magazines. So there's Brew Your Own for home brewers, Winemaker for people who make wine at home, and Brew Pub was for people that own brew pubs and microbreweries. So in the early 90s, this was, the very beginning of the excitement of the craft beer industry. And now everyone knows it's blown up and all that. And I sold it in 2000. And from 2000 to 2020, I'd never done anything that long in my life. I owned a company called Niche Media, and we put on events for very narrow vertical market, in those days, magazines. And then everyone ended up with online, media. And it actually, that era was great in the fact that magazine publishing for 100 years was exactly the same thing. Nothing really had changed. And all of a sudden, the early 2000s, that's when the internet really took off. Everyone was using it. And so publishers were really stuck. Like, what do we do? How do you make money online? How do you sell advertising? How do you sell sponsorships? And so, although they were struggling, it was great for us in the fact that we could help them, with these educational events. And as a event producer, that's what you want, is events that people desperately need to attend. And anyway, it's a good era. And I very luckily sold my business in 2020. In my last day at work, I sold it to pretty big company, and was like basically the first day of the pandemic. So then what am I going to do? As far as my, we had the pandemic, we couldn't do anything. I'm sure everyone remembers that. So I launched a podcast, and it's called I Used to Be Somebody. And it's a really fun podcast, for people 50 plus. Although I get a lot of people in their 40s, because this whole idea of second acts and retiring early and all that is really sort of catching on. And so, like JJ said, we've had 60 episodes of that. But the whole idea behind, basically, I'm like a guinea pig for the podcast. And there's this concept of what we call unretirement. So you don't want to retire. I want to do something new, something fun, something more meaningful. And the fact is, if you're healthy and you're 60, there's actually a really good chance you're going to live for another 3 decades. So, what do you got to do with these 30 years? Because our parents, their retirement was entirely different, especially for men. They sort of worked themselves until they were 55, 60. I don't know, took a vacation to Florida and then died. So, but now, I mean, like I said, if you're in reasonable shape in your 60s, you're probably going to live a long time. So you got to figure out, what are you going to do? Because, there's only so many trips you can do. You can play golf every day, but that's really not particularly stimulating, particularly if you've had a big career that was meaningful and fun for you. So that's the whole idea behind the podcast. So I've really loved it. And what I really love the most about doing the podcast is I get a chance to meet all sorts of people I would never have gotten to meet in a million years. So I've interviewed a couple of high power attorneys that rehabilitated themselves to have meaningful second acts. And what's really interesting is, we talk about their career and all that, and how people have pivoted and are doing stuff entirely different than they did before. I interviewed a guy who was the CFO of the New York Yankees under George Steinbrenner, and he also worked as CFO under Martha Stewart. So his story was pretty interesting. I've interviewed professional athletes that have had amazing second acts. I've interviewed the founder of High Times Magazine, an NBA coach, big time chef. I interviewed the CFO of Bank of America, and he was there during the 2008 crash of Wall Street. Political hacks, pawn shop kings, and just about everyone else. And what's really exciting is, hearing what they're doing in their second act. So I'm going to give some examples here, and I'm going to start with some Miami University graduates. So there's Richard Haydock, and hopefully Richard is listening to this. And he graduated in 1969. He was a big time life science executive. And to be honest with you, he was one of the most difficult interviews I had, in the fact that he's really humble. It was really hard to get him to talk about like his achievements and all the stuff he did. So because a really great guest really wants to brag and tell you all this cool stuff. But what was great about Richard was he had was an example of, in his childhood, what he really wanted to do was be a book author. He really wanted to write. And so he wrote at age 73 his very first book, and it's Shifting Gears. And he interviewed 50 baby boomers, and they talk about their meaningful retirement. So I would really recommend getting Richard's book, Shifting Gears. It's really phenomenal. And his experience of talking to him, I think was phenomenal. So and then Richard and I end up becoming friends. He lives in central coast of California. Okay, Val Haller. I'm guessing Val is not watching this, but anyway, she and I graduated at the same time, 1979. I did not know Val, but in interviewing her, I found out at Miami University, she started this business where she cut guys' hairs. In fact, I think she met her future husband doing this, who also went to Miami. And she would charge $5. And she said she would cut 10, 15 guys' hairs for $5, all in cash. And she did this her entire career when she was at Miami. And she said she made a small fortune doing that. I thought that was really fun. But anyway, she started Val's List in, I believe, like 2007. And her whole idea was, as you get older, it's like, who are the cool new groups? We sort of lose, we lose track of that sort of thing. So she has a service where, based on what your interests are, she will send you like the cool groups, and you can impress like your kids or your grandkids with it. So she was a great interview. And then the next one is Bob Vogel. And so JJ, I think you know this character.
I do. I was, like I said at the beginning, this is Dr. Vogel kind of brought us together and set up this conversation because a shared contact. And I'll share my quick Bob Vogel story. When I came to Miami in 1999, I guess I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I took a bunch of the basic Miami Plan freshman courses, and the one professor who stuck out to me, really made it interesting, was Bob Vogel. And he was in a big lecture hall, I believe in Laws Hall, doing the intro to mass communications class. And that ended up helping me choose my major. He did such a great job, and I loved the class that I ended up being a mass comm major, in large part because of his success in that class.
Yeah. I just reconnected with Bob like a year ago, I think through LinkedIn, and he was by far my favorite professor. In fact, and I've talked to him many times besides the interview, and boy, he has quite an alumni of successful students, which is really fun. And I've connected with some of those people. But what was interesting, Bob was at Miami forever. I mean, 45 years, I think like something like that, and loved his class. And so he didn't retire until his 70s. And he had always wanted to go in the entertainment business, and he's quite a musician. And he teamed up with a classmate of mine, Lenny Dave, who's very talented speaker, entertainer, and they traveled around the country. I'm not quite sure. I think Bob at that point was about 75 years old, and he hit like the traveling life of an entertainer. And he's absolutely hilarious in the interview talking about it. And he's continued. In fact, he's up in Wisconsin right now. And I think it's been the past 5 years. He has a cabin there, and he is the entertainer at this sort of high-end restaurant. It's called Smokies. And 2 or 3 nights, Bob does show tunes, and he is unbelievable and just has the time of his life. and it's made a huge difference in his life. And so I don't know if Bob's listening because he's in Wisconsin, and according to Bob, Wisconsin has not gotten internet. Maybe next year, JJ, Wisconsin's on the list to get internet.
I think
So
so. I think so.
so
2023.
he does live for the most part, if not in Wisconsin, in Oxford. He still lives there. So can you show him like how to listen to it later,
Yeah,
JJ?
yeah, I'll help
Okay.
him out. Yeah, since he
All right.
taught me some communication stuff, I guess I can pay it back now.
Right. So another guest I had that I loved was Rennell Brooks Moon. So Rennell was a big time radio personality in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And she was on, and I remember listening to her. She was in the Morning Zoo crew. Does everyone remember those shows where it was usually, four people just yelling at each other about whatever? Anyway, but she was well known. And in 2000, she got a call from the San Francisco Giants to try out to be the ballpark announcer, and she got it, and it's unbelievable. She is a lifelong Giants fan, and and she's a phenomenal announcer, and she was only the second woman ever to announce uh for baseball or for any professional sport. She was the second announcer, and she's actually in the Baseball Hall of Fame because of that, and just a great person. So that was fun. And I've got to know Rennell pretty well, and I get access to the booth when she's in there, so it's pretty cool. And she brought 3 world championships to San Francisco. So another guy that was a great interview was Bob Tushman, and Bob and I we went to high school together, and he worked for the Food Network. So the Food Network started in the early 90s, and I think he started year 2 or 3, and it was a whole new thing then. I mean, and now everyone just takes for granted shows like that, but really successful career over 20 years, and he helped develop diners, drive-ins, and dives, $40 a day with Rachel Ray, um, uh, Ina a garden show, and Everyday Italian with Giada, and a whole lot of other shows. I mean, dozens of other shows that he helped develop. So he did that for 20 plus years, which in the TV business is like 80 years. And the past 7 years, he's been a professor at NYU, and he absolutely loves it. He teaches an entertainment class. So Bob was great. And then a lot of people listening probably know who Sudden Sam McDonald was. So I grew up in Cleveland, and he was a hero of mine. And he had a great career in baseball, lasted 12 years. The problem with Sudden Sam was he was an alcoholic. And the thing is, he's a very disciplined alcoholic, in the fact that what he told me was he's a starting pitcher, so you pitch every 4th or 5th day. So after he pitched for the next 3 days, he would just be drunk. But then 2 days before he would pitch, he would not have a drink. And he sort of did this routine for, like I said, 12 years. He was a 6 or 7 time All-Star. He was he was touted as the next Sandy Koufax. And unfortunately, because of his problem with alcoholism, and I said, "Oh, well, you left baseball," and Sam corrected me, "Carl, I was kicked out of baseball." And he has had an amazing second act where he went back to college, and he studied drug and alcohol counseling, and he became the very first counselor of drug and alcohol for MLB, Major League Baseball. He worked for Major League Baseball, and he was actually the very first one in all pro sports. And uh, he has literally saved hundreds of people's lives and their families' lives. And he's just had a great second act. Anyway, he ended up working for the Toronto Blue Jays in the early 90s as their counselor for drug and alcohol. and also a psychologist. And the 2 years he was there, they won the World Series, and they voted him a full share of the World Series money, and he got 2 World Series rings. And it's just like he is just thrilled, and it was a great story. Uh, One other person I really liked was Melissa Davey. So Melissa, it's interesting. She was a big time insurance executive, and she would go often to DC and work with Congress and all that. I mean, she was really big time, had a big time job, and she had a chance encounter with M. Night Shyamalan, and she ended up spending one day on a set of one of his movies he was shooting. She got to spend the whole day with him, and he had lunch with her, and she just loved it. Always was interested in film, and uh, and so he said to her at lunch, he's like, what do you do? And she starts explaining this insurance job, and I mean, he doesn't really even understand and really isn't listening, but he could tell she wasn't thrilled with what she was doing. And so he said to her, "What do you really want to do?" And she said, "I want to have your job." And he said, "Well, given your age, you better hurry up." She was about 66 years old, and I admire her so much. She, at age 70, started, created, produced, directed a documentary called Beyond 60. And it is a great movie. And it talks about women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s and the incredible stuff that they're doing. So Melissa was great. And I've gotten to meet her a couple times, and she's just a great person. Another guy was Paul Ollinger. Paul Ollinger, I think he was employee number 38 at Facebook. So he retired early, like around 30 years old, and didn't know what to do. And he is now a professional comedian, really successful. And he has a great podcast called Crazy Money, and really interesting story. And a recent person I've interviewed is Terry Ferendorf. And Terry was one of the very first female brewmasters in craft brewing. And she was great. And this was in the early 80s, that she was in craft brewing, and she didn't even know any other females in the business. And she started traveling. She took this big trip, and she heard about, oh, here's this other woman brewing in like Indiana. Anyway, she started connecting with all these other women in the craft beer industry, and she founded this association called the Pink Boot Society, and it's all women in brewing, and she has 5,000 members now. Just like an unbelievable career. I mean, and her second half has been great. And then there's me. So we mentioned earlier, JJ brought up, I talk about second acts and all that, and my second act is having the podcast and now being a published author, I guess. But I always was interested in stand-up comedy, and I took a workshop just for 6 weeks, and had a great mentor who's a professional comedian, Jack Gallagher. And so I was on stage, over 100 people were there, and it was an incredible experience. So, that's my story. So I'm sorry, I'll go back. Yeah. So for second act, success act. This is what I've learned: secrets to a successful second act. And the first is, go back to early childhood dreams. I mentioned Richard Haydock and how he always wanted to be a book author. And I would probably say about 10 or 12 of the people I've interviewed, they talked about what they were doing, when they were, what their dreams were when they were 7 or 8 years old. They wanted to be a musician, or, they wanted to be a chef, or, photographer, or when you were a teenager. So that's always a good thing. The second one is pushing beyond your comfort zone. So in retirement, you have the freedom to fail. and you're really not being judged like you were before. And you know what, if you fail, it's no one really cares. And you just pick yourself up, and you try something else. So it's really no harm, no fall in doing that. And the third thing is listen to your intuition. It will steer you towards your best future. Don't ever believe there's only one thing that you can do. And it's sort of funny. Before I move on, I always go back to I told my dentist, I was doing this podcast, and it's about second acts. And what he told me was dentists are only good at being dentists. And I don't know if that's true or not, because I've yet to have a doctor on my show. So, if you know some interesting doctors that have done second acts, I don't know. Nothing against doctors, we need them, but I guess they're really focused on what they did, and I don't know what. Okay, fourth thing is is embrace being a beginner, and this is really important. So here you've whatever you're doing in your career, you've been successful, you know how to do it, people admire you, they want your opinion and all that. And now you're going to try something totally new. Well, you're not going to, big shock, you're not going to be that good at it. I'll just use pickleball, for example. You'll play it, and I'll talk about pickleball later. It's really easy to pick up, but you're not going to be ready to be a professional. And whatever it is that you're going to do, say, oh, I always want to learn how to play the piano. You're not going to be Mozart. And people really get frustrated because they're used to having successes. So, embrace being a beginner. It's sort of fun. It's like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And all of a sudden you're learning something new. It's a wonderful thing. And last thing is change your metric. So the way you've been evaluating your life in your work world is entirely different. So you've been looking at external validations. Oh, I got a raise, or I have a new job title, or I'm really well known in the industry. Everyone admires me. Well, that goes away really fast. So you have to be the one to monitor your own progress. It's an entire different metric. So the next thing is lessons learned that I've had from the podcast. And the first thing, it's important to have a mindful approach to your unretirement. So the way I think of it is, if you're going to have a successful second act, it doesn't often happen on accident. It's sort of like I look at it as like starting another company. You're going to have to talk to other people that are experts in that and learn about that. And I would write a business plan about it. Before, I've seen people invest a lot of money in something. Oh, that seems really cool. And, get this $40,000 kitchen, and I'm going to be like the chef or whatever. And you know what? You may end up, you don't like it that much. So, be mindful about what it is, and always, try it out before you invest a lot of money. The second thing is the power of no. So a lot of our lives, we have had to say yes to some stuff we didn't want to say yes to. Particularly, I think about people in the corporate world where the boss says, well, I need that report on Thursday. Well, if you want to keep your job or be successful or be promoted, you get that report in by Thursday. Well, you know what? In unretirement, you don't have to do that report. So do the things you want to do, and get used to like saying no. And it's amazing power, and you'll just be happier. The next item is the key is a balance of structure and flexibility. So you have to have some sort of structure. I've seen people that are like just surfing the internet, and I'll just figure this out, and they end up, oh, the whole day they wasted their time. So you have to have some sort of structure, but also some flexibility. It's like, I mean, in unretirement, it's like, oh, you know what? I just on Fridays, I don't want I don't want to schedule anything. And I want to maybe just try something new, or do whatever you want. So it's a good combination, a good striking a balance of structure and flexibility. And the next one is finally your chance to focus on you. So everyone listening was was a child. You had your parents telling you what to do, or at some point you're older now. Maybe you have to take care of your parents, or you have maybe you're a parent and you're taking care of them, or a nephew or niece that you have to take care of, or you had work obligations and all that. Well, you know what? I'm, for example, 65, and I'm like everyone else. I've had to do, a lot of different things for other people. And you know what? You only have so much time to live. So, you at some point need to focus more on you and not all the other people surrounding you. So, and then the three keys really are your relationship, your family, friends, work, your purpose, and intellectual challenge. And purpose is huge. So, I mean, you really have to figure out something you're really excited about getting out of bed, and I'm going to do this and I'm excited about. But it's really a balancing act of your relationships and figuring out what your purpose is and challenging yourself. So, though, if you're able to do that, people tend to have a really happy, second act and time in their life. So a little bit about pickleball. Um, and speaking of, doing something new, this is something I just started doing 2 years ago. The fastest growing sport in America. There are 5 million players in America and growing. And it's crazy. I started like 2.5 years ago, and I didn't know what it was. And played it the first time, and I just fell in love with it. And oh my God, the popularity is unbelievable. If you subscribe to the New York Times, I'm not kidding. They have an article, it seems like every day, about pickleball, and it's just everywhere. People are talking about it, and it's been growing at a 20% growth rate for 3 years in a row, and that is not slowing down. The next one is it's great exercise. So I don't like going to the gym and doing all that. I have to be fooled into exercising. And oh my God, I'll play an hour and a half of pickleball. You'll be drenching wet and just like having a great time. But it is really, really great exercise. And next, we have it. It's super easy to play. So it's a court that's about a quarter the size of a tennis court, and you play doubles. So the area that you're covering is not very involved. You barely have to run. I mean, you do have to run at certain points, but even if you've never really been an athlete, you can play it. I mean, I've seen people that have really never done sports, and they can play pickleball. And next, we have low threshold to enter. So it's not a big investment in money and time. A paddle will cost you between $60 and $150 for an incredible paddle. But and then if you get pickballs, you get 3 in a set. They're $8. That's your total investment. Okay. And there are public pickleball courts everywhere that you play for free. And I mean, if you get more involved, you want to join a club or whatever, but that's the whole investment. And time wise, it's not like playing golf where you're going to be playing for 5 hours and it's going to sort of kill your day. You play for an hour of pickleball, hour and 15 minutes, and you've had great exercise and a lot of fun. And then last thing is it's very social. I think this is a huge part of it. And particularly people, as you get older, the socialization in your life is really important. The people that live the longest and I think the happiest are ones that have a very active social life. They're around people, and it's instantly a way, to meet people that you've never met. I joined a club. I have 15 really close friends, all from pickleball, and I would never have met them, and they're fantastic people. And the social aspect of it is really great. So I mean, you can see why I like it. And the very last thing, of course, is super fun. And I'm going to talk about our book, Pickleball for Dummies, but we literally have the word fun in the book, and we even talk about it at the very beginning, because it is just fun for an hour and a half. All you're doing is, playing this game, laughing with your friends, and it's just a great thing that's happened in my life and for a lot of other people too as well. So that brings us to the Pickleball for Dummies, and this is sort of weird. It's not like I have this ambition, like I'm going to become this book author and all that. But it's just sort of because I was in publishing, I got approached, and it was because of my podcast that someone was listening to, and they played pickleball and they were involved with the Dummy series, and that I'm co-writer. The other writers are way more. We used our pickleball instructors Monard and Rianne Steele, and they wrote most of the book. And my wife wrote a lot of it and edited it, the whole book. And I wrote some of it, but I'm more the marketing guy and all that. But it was a great experience, and I didn't even realize, like, being a Dummies writer is sort of a big deal. It's an incredible brand that it's a $1 billion business, and the people at Wiley have been great. And anyway, the whole experience of writing the book has been really wonderful. But anyway, it comes out October 11th. You can order it on Amazon right now, and it's already doing pretty well. The whole world comes down to Amazon right now, and based on the pre-orders, they've already printed a second printing before the first ones even come out. So, but if you're interested in pickleball, or if you know someone, go on Amazon and buy it. And the Amazon people get first. So, um, the I just want to say, as far as retirement and all that, before we talk about questions, is it's your chance to um, channel your inner kid. It's when we were kids, what was everyone's favorite, thing that they did? For me, especially being dyslexic, which I can't even pronounce correctly, it was recess. And like, I think that's what pickball, really did for me. But I'm just suggesting everyone embrace the new, and unretirement can be whatever you want it to be, and it's really totally up to you. And I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, and hopefully you inspired a couple of people to ideas on what they could do for their second act. So yeah, and if we can just go to the put up the info,
Yep.
the contact info. Yeah.
There
So
you go.
yeah, in case, I'll answer whatever questions JJ has, or via the audience. But if you have any questions or anything, just, the best thing is email me, Carl at Pickball Media HQ, or go on our site, Pickball Media HQ. Anyway, I really appreciate it, JJ.
All right. Yeah, we really appreciate your time, Carl. That was great. Thank you very much. Lots of good advice and good stories. And we have some questions coming in, and we'll take more. If you're watching live, please feel free to share. So I will get us started here. We'll start with Jeff Clare, class of 79. He says, can Carl actually believe that Miami asked him back to speak based on his undergraduate time? Was it surprising to him?
Thanks, Jeff. Well, yeah, it is surprising. And apparently, one qualification is not like your GPA, because if they checked my transcript, boy, I barely made it. So anyway, but thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that.
Yeah, we didn't look up your grades before making the invite. So next time. We have a faculty member, Paul Hunter, who says, is it true that Mark Hunter was a messy college roommate?
No, it wasn't, Paul. Mark Hunter did clean once a semester. So, I would not agree with that. And I'm really not going to badmouth Mark too much because he got me through money and banking. So anyway,
Nice. All right, and then we have
the,
Gary Sirac
these are
from the.
pretty serious ones, JJ.
Yeah, we'll get to the serious ones in a second. I got one more. Gary Sirac from the class of '73 says, "How do you make reservations at the Landau Tiki Bar?"
Anyway, what Gary is referring to is my podcast. I used to be somebody. I actually produce it and interview people when I do it live. We have a tiki bar that is our whole garage is a tiki bar. So, Gary, you are invited anytime
That's
at
nice
all.
of you.
Yeah.
All right, I have one update before we get to a few more serious questions. This is also from Jeff Clare, who let us know that I forget Haller, Amy, was it Haller? Val Haller. Her maiden name was Gruger, and Mark Haller also graduated in '79, and she cut Jeff's hair. So we have a little update on Val, also from Jeff. All right. So Jeffrey from the class of '92 says, "How do I even get started looking at my next career adventure when I'm busy with my day-to-day work?"
That's a good question because we do get overwhelmed in that job and consumed. And what I learned by interviewing a lot of people, I would say about half of them said they always had a side gig, something that they were interested in, that had nothing to do with what their full-time job was. And so that gives you some confidence, that there is something else beyond what you're doing. And in many cases of people I interviewed, that side gig ended up being their second act. So, and a lot of other people, they uh, they said that they always had 2 or 3 jobs. So, and I think we have a new age of working right now, like there aren't a lot of corporations that hire you and 45 years later give you the gold chain and all that or whatever they give you watch. So I think there is a new wave of working, and a lot of people are going for the 2-3 different kinds of jobs, and then they end up in second act doing one of those. So it sort of edges you in there just on the weekend, a couple hours a week. It could be volunteering somewhere or whatever it is. I think 3 people ended up being professors or associate professors by teaching one class in addition to their job. So
yeah, and it sounds like if you also have a hobby that you're using to pass time anyway while you're working, you can build off that as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, this question from Steve sounds like the answer is not much, but what was the most useful thing you learned at university?
I would say hands down, Laws Hall and Associates. So I was very frustrated, because I wasn't a great student. And, when you're taking classes, I took physics and sports. I actually would try to find the easiest classes. That was my whole deal. But you're taking a lot of those intro classes, science classes, and you probably have to take a couple of math classes and stuff like that. And I'm like, how is this ever going to, apply to what I'm going to do? And all of a sudden I took Laws Hall and Associates. So if anyone doesn't know, Laws Hall at the time was the business hall. And God, they must have started this like 35 years ago, where they get a real client and you put together a marketing program. And it's a combination, as I recall, marketing and communications and art students. And you put together commercials and print ads and all that. And the client I had was Kings Island Amusement Park. And it was just a great, experience, and worked so hard. And I got a lot out of Laws Hall and Associates.
Yeah, great program. Cool.
Are they still doing it?
I'm not sure. I think there's something like it, but it might have been renamed. But
Okay.
I know it was definitely around when I was in school. So,
Yep.
Okay, we've got some more questions coming in for you, Carl. Dick Haydick was watching because he's asked us, what was your most fun experience as a first-time author?
Well, the book hasn't quite come out yet. So anyway, it will actually, amazingly, they are actually printing it today, which I just found out before we got on the show. I would say the most fun was working with the other authors. It's not easy having 4 co-authors, but it made it a lot more fun because I've interviewed dozens of authors, and I have a lot of friends that are authors, and it's sort of a lonely thing, and you're sort of like, yeah, you have to be self-motivated and all that. So working as a team, it made it a lot more easy, and also the subject matter, pickleball, we all had a passion for. So I learned a lot more about it, and actually when I started Pickleball Media, that's actually the name of our company, and the podcast, I didn't know where it was going to lead to. And sometimes in second acts that's what happens. Like, I had no idea I was going to become a book author when I started, the podcast and all that. So you sort of just have to take a chance and just see where it goes. So,
yeah, awesome. Unfortunately, Carl, we're going to have to issue a correction here. Apparently, Wisconsin does have the internet. Diana from the class of 81 says, great to hear that Dr. Vogel plays at Smokies. Our place up north is 10 minutes from there, and Wisconsin does have the internet. So that's good to hear. So, okay. This one goes back to kind of the beginning. You talked about being good at one thing, and this is actually more in your actual job. I guess the question is, how do you find the one good thing, the one thing you're good at, from Carolyn?
Oh,
it's a big picture question, but I don't know if you have any quick.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it is sort of intuitive. It's like, because I said my one thing was just sort of figuring out markets. So I guess that sort of goes to your passion. It's like what interests you. And for me, it was more a marketing thing, and I could spot something that was hot just by reading and sort of projecting the future in my head. So I don't, that's sort of a toughie. Yeah. Can we talk about the tiki bar or something?
Well, that is a good segue to another question from Jeff Clare, who's been very active on the message board. But he says, Carl, in your whole career, you were definitely ahead of the curve, from software to craft brewing, and now pickleball. What is the next big trend coming?
I'm not telling Jeff Clare. I mean, I'm going to capitalize on this whole thing. So,
dang it.
Yeah,
we wanted your next big idea, but that's okay. All right, what else do we have? Jim says, I'm a 30-year practicing attorney. I work for the good guys. He wants us to know. He is eligible to leave his job and wants to do something completely different, work in higher ed. His identity is so wrapped up in being an environmental attorney, he doesn't know how he feels about dropping that identity in favor of a new one. He's passionate about the second act, but also a little fearful of giving up something he's known for so long.
Yeah.
Any advice?
My advice to anyone who wants to, I mean, I think the key thing is, you recognize at a certain point, I want to do something else, that this is not, I don't have that passion I did. For me, I sold that niche media company when I'm like, God, I've done this for 20 years. I could do these events in my sleep. And unfortunately, I did them in my sleep and had nightmares, because the event business, there's a lot of pressure. People are coming. You have 300-400 people at an annual event where everything for 3 days, has to go right. and I used to have nightmares and all that. And I finally realized like I just need to do something else. So I think that's the key is like, if you know that you want to move on, do it. And the biggest advice I've given on the podcast is do it early. Like I wish I had sold and was doing something different 5 years ago. I wish rather than at 63, I had, started doing something at 58. I do. So if you have that inclination, do it. And the thing is, also whatever your ideas are, just, I mean, write them down. I mean, literally write them down. And here's like these 10 things I always want to do, and see if any of them make any sense. Like, a lot of it is also financially. Are you going to need to make money, or are you not? Or can you do this to have fun? Or, there are a lot of questions on second act, and they're in a different situation. So, and then try it out. It's funny, like, for example, people are like on retirement, a little off topic, but everyone's thinking about where do I want to live, in retirement and all that. And people make huge mistakes. They'll like sell everything and I'm moving to Austin, downtown Austin. And then they're like, oh, you know what? I don't think I like this after they've done that. So, rent a place, or if you want to go abroad, rent a place in London for a month or something like that. Or job wise, try it out on the weekend, and see if you like it or not, but if you have that inclination that it's like, I don't really want to do this anymore, stop and do something else.
Yeah. Sounds good. This one's not exactly a question, but Anne from the class of 91 says that she has started to think about what she wants to do in retirement and asked to reduce her work hours to 32 hours per week. She gets Fridays off, and that gives her time to start researching her options while she still keeps healthcare and full benefits. So with a reduction in pay, but I don't know if everyone has that option, but something to potentially explore with your day job if you can start working some more time in to figure out what's next.
Yeah, that's a really good way to go. Dr. Vogel, for example, I think it was the last 5 years, he went very part-time, but he kept on hanging on to like 1 or 2 classes, and then it eases you into it all. And then you wake up the next day and like everyone's forgotten your name and who that you were and all that. So anyway, be prepared for that, because that happens like for real.
Yeah. All right. Well, that covers our questions. Carl, thank you so much. This was an awesome conversation. Everyone, make sure you check out I Used to Be Somebody podcast, and we'll throw these up one more time here, and Pickleball for Dummies on Amazon. And any parting words, Carl?
It's just a great experience. And in recent time, I reconnected with more classmates, and I would really recommend that to people. It's just a great thing. And I would say that's the one positive thing out of the pandemic, was you had the time to do that. And we don't relive like the glory days in school. We talk about like the future. And I think that's what's important.
Yeah, cool.
What you're going to do next.
Yeah, and LinkedIn makes that a lot easier too, since there's like 165,000 Miami alumni on there. You can find the people that you went to school with, and then obviously we always want people to come back to campus, alumni weekend, and stay involved with Miami and connect with classmates. So obviously we encourage that from the Alumni Association as well. And we encourage you to watch more of our webinars on our website. We have a bunch of web events coming up throughout the next month, lots of exciting topics. So please check those out. And I think that's all I have to say, Carl. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for your time, and take care.
Thanks a lot, JJ. And thanks for everyone that listened.
Yeah, same. All right. See ya.